Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
We're in control of the fear that plagues the majority of this population. We can do things that change that. And that brings me hope.
Yes.
We just have to talk about it more.
That's right.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan, and this is my friend and co-host, Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
Oh boy, today we're talking about public speaking.
Yay.
The worst thing ever.
But it's not.
It's not. We're
It
going to talk
doesn't
about
have to
that.
be.
Doesn't have to do it. We don't have to be scared about it. Trust me. As a 9, it's been something I've had to overcome in leadership. So I wanted to share, before we get really into it, I just want to set some context into place for our listeners. I have seen you speak, over the years, I bet 20 times, at least.
Oh, at least.
At least.
Yeah, at least.
I mean, because if I started working with you 16 years ago, let's say you averaged at least 1 or 2, 1 to 1.5 per year.
Yeah.
That's about right. Yeah. So anyway, you think that's right. What I want to note about you is I think the first time your style has changed over the years. And part of what we're going to talk, part of what we're going to talk about is kind of the not secret sauce, but tips for how you overcame all of that.
Right.
You went from one style, which was slightly rigid.
Robotic. Felt like I had to memorize
It was awful.
30 slides. Yeah.
And I did too.
Yeah, of course.
I felt the same way for you. Like, we've got to memorize these things together. So, and then it transformed into something completely different. And we're going to talk about that. And now it's way more human and way more approachable.
Yeah.
Where I want to hear you. I always wanted to hear you, but audiences.
Sure.
So let's talk about that. I also wanted to start with asking you a question. Have you ever been fearful? We did an episode last week.
Yeah.
Really rooted in fear, bravery, and courage. So I wanted to touch on this. Have you ever been fearful of public speaking?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it comes in different forms. The fear. So I will say that my personality type, I don't fear being in front of people.
Right.
Some people fear that aspect of it,
That's a good
right?
point. Yeah.
That part doesn't cripple me.
Okay.
Am I smart enough on this subject? Am I going to come across as knowing what I'm talking about?
Yes.
It ultimately comes down to preparedness.
Yes.
And I got trapped in the early part of my career when I would be invited to speak as a subject matter expert. So a lot about marketing. It was mostly, I was being invited in to talk about marketing. Sometimes I would be the person who, was delivering results of a study that, say, one of our associations have done. So it was very almost scholastic, the type of speaking that I was doing.
Okay.
And I was pretty successful of that in college. If I think, I grew up again in 4-H, and 4-H teaches you a lot about public speaking, and I was trained in it. And we used a lot of the Dale Carnegie method to learn. And so I knew the fundamentals of speaking. And it was natural for me to be able to stand up in front of people and deliver words, right? But the more I was asked to speak in the industry, in my career, I progressively got worse, literally. And so that built the fear up. And it was the fear that, what we're fearing when we're about to speak in front of, whether it's one person, 10 people, when you're delivering a speech or a talk, and as leaders, we should be doing that. And that could be in a number of scenarios that I started to fear, am I prepared enough? And I focused so much on my knowing the information, knowing any possible scenario of questions.
Right. Which is
when
impossible.
people don't learn that way. So what I was doing was I was missing the opportunity to truly understand, how do people what are people expecting from this talk? And I got it wrong. And that put me into this spiral, which heightened my fear. My fear was, I don't know everything I should absolutely know. You know, this could be like a 40-minute talk or a 30-minute talk, sometimes 20 minutes. And I felt like I was going too far. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
That you have to know everything. Then as my public, and we'll to get into that more, but as my public speaking started to shift, especially as doing it internally in our company, I was speaking on different topics outside of the company. So I was still a subject matter expert sometimes, but then in other ways I was speaking on women panels. I was giving a speech of, being honored in some way.
Yeah.
So I had to give a talk about my journey or whatever it may be. And then ultimately this podcast is a form of public speaking.
Right.
I mean, y'all are not here, but y'all are listening. Thank
Right.
you for that, by the way.
Right.
And so, yeah, that was early on. I had a fear of what are we going to sound like? And it was a fear of being judged, a fear of rejection, a fear of you're going to turn the damn thing off and never listen again. It was this fear that was really unnecessary. But again, as we talk about in episode 73, when we talk about bravery and courage, the best thing that you can do is name that fear and sit with it. It's like, what is the worst that can happen up here? And so then that started to shape, but I'll talk about other things that I did to help progress my public speaking skills. So,
Okay, perfect. All right, great. That was a great lead in. Before we jump into conquering your fear of public speaking, let's hop to this quick advertisement. Self Smarter listeners, I'm so happy to share with you a little secret that we've been working on that is coming soon to you, our devoted listeners. In just a couple of weeks, we will have some of the tools and helpful information that we talk about each week on the podcast available to you. We are doing this because you've asked for it. We haven't had it to give you, and now we've been working hard here to prepare solutions that may be of service to you as you develop yourself and your teams. Stay tuned. I'll be back with more details soon, but just know our team cares so deeply about your success, and we hope this new evolution of Self Smarter proves it to you. #excited. Okay, in terms of this topic, why are we having this session? I think that's a good, fair way to open. I think it's high time that we reframe public speaking for leaders and you're going to give us some statistics on how bad it is out there in terms of fear.
yeah, that we're not alone by being fearful of it.
So we know, listeners, I see you. I know that you're scared. But here's the deal. The truth is, it doesn't matter if you're speaking to a room of your teammates, your executives, or your peers, or your people that work with you in a team every single day, or addressing a large audience.
Yeah, I mean,
It doesn't matter.
And I think another way to tee that up for everyone is it could be a talk that you're giving.
Yes.
It could be a speech you're giving. It could be any number of things, but I think what we have to do is just get comfortable with delivering a message.
Yes.
If we think about it in that context, it's different than, I have to go give a speech.
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, it was absolutely crippling years ago. Like you were like, why don't you give the speech? I'm like, I'm not going to give that. So I can't. Crippling in terms of fear holding me back, like literally couldn't move. Mm-hmm. But the truth is I knew that it was holding me back.
Yeah.
And so is it holding you back? We're going to talk about that today, because it's one of the ways that you as a leader can absolutely elevate your presence.
Absolutely.
We talked a bit about this in episode 47, which is the exact opposite number of 74. I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
And it's called Improve Your Presence as a Leader. And so today we're going to dive deeper into this piece of the puzzle in terms of our fear, in terms of public speaking.
Yep.
And our intention is to provide help in the form of tips and suggestions for making the need for public speaking a little less worrisome, no matter who you're speaking to.
Correct.
So, Danelle, why don't you kick us off with some of these wow stats? These are wowie.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt anyone's listening to this who hasn't heard the stat that loosely gets tossed around that we fear public speaking more than we fear death.
Yeah, that's...
And by the way, that's all over the internet, and we couldn't find a source to it. So that drives us crazy.
Yes.
We don't want to be those type of information sharers, but we've all heard that. And there's article after article that tells you how to combat it, but we couldn't find the original source. But I'm sure there's been plenty of surveys out there, because that couldn't have just been born out of anywhere. And if you're listening, you might be like, hell yeah, I fear speaking more than death.
I say hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what we thought would be more important is let's actually find some studies that give us a more rich context to make us feel less alone in that sense. Is that, and we found this article published by the University of Florida in 2022, so recent, and it says the surveys typically indicate that between 70 and 75% of those surveyed of the population fears public speaking. So 70 to 75% fear it. What that means is more than 200 million people feel nervous about talking to others, like just talking to others.
Yes.
Okay.
And in a world full of people talking,
is
fearsome. They're scared.
They're scared. We are scared. It's not like we are not in that stat, right? And it was interesting, and we certainly want to bring this up, is that men are more at ease when speaking in front of an audience. One survey found that 40% of women reported they were afraid of public speaking, while 37% of men agreed. And then 10% of the population, so in essence, 10% of the population loves speaking in front of people, a survey cited, where 10% are absolutely terrified of speaking in front of people, whereas 80% fall somewhere in the middle. But fear is still in those 80%.
Yeah.
Right.
More than likely.
People
are afraid.
And I can tell you that the ones who love speaking in front of people have worked to get there.
Oh, absolutely. Because my answer would be different now.
Right. Exactly. And mine is too.
I love it.
And, I worked to get to that point. So.
I mean, the bottom line is we have a problem as leaders. And the problem is, how can we be great at leading if we're all afraid to speak in public? Mm-hmm. Aren't we always speaking in public, no matter the audience?
Yeah, public, I think, that's one way to look at it, is that we're speaking in public. I think the more meaningful way to think about it is that you're speaking to others and you're trying to educate or enhance their learning, or you're sharing something with them. So when we think about that, it's less about the numbers that we're speaking to, but thinking of it as all the same. How am I going to share this information with someone to help them become more enlightened, again, educated, understood, confronted? It could be a number of things that we're doing. But when we try to make, and I think it stems from, I can at least say for myself.
Okay.
I don't know how you feel about this. But as I mentioned early on in the episode, as a young child, I was exposed to public speaking, which I think is a great gift of 4-H and FFA and the things that I participated in school. Then as I went into college, my speaking became more around like plans or marketing plans that I had to present, or projects that I had to present. So again, very rooted in almost the scholastic education realm where you're sharing information with others. And I think that in itself can just drudge up all kinds of weird emotions.
Yes.
And so, whereas I think we would all benefit from thinking, and then again, this is what changed my mindset around it, is if we're thinking about sharing a story. Because most of us probably can find more ease, and I'm just going to tell a story.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell a story, and a story has an arc. And when you start to study those types of things and you think of yourself, I think again, we're going to share some things that I did, but number one is when you think of yourself sitting there, what do you like to listen to?
Exactly.
And we forget that shit. We forget that we throw that out the window.
When we
speak. We're like,
how about these bullet points?
How about these 50 slides that we're going to put someone into a coma with? Or this information that's so in-depth that people just needed the first 3 numbers. And I'm so guilty of this. I'll share 100 numbers with you before noon, and you're knee night.
Yeah.
Really, it was 3 numbers you probably needed to see. So storytelling, I think, is what this, and I wanted to change the name of this, but we needed you to understand the context because you can relate to public speaking.
Yes.
But what we want to do is the information we want to share today that's been helpful to us and continues to help guide us is we don't want you to just think of speaking in front of a large audience.
Yes.
We want it to be more of in your everyday. And of course, there's going to be those special occasions, but more so how we engage with others really, if we can use some of these tactics.
Yeah. In fact, after preparing for this episode, we actually gave a decent pitch today to a prospective customer at DMA. And I used this we'd gone through, the deck was probably 10 to 15 slides. It wasn't like an overwhelming deck. Okay. But I could see that the client his mind was going and racing. And so I brought him back with this. I said, here are 2 things I want you to take away from this.
Right.
And then put it into a story that by that time, I know him well enough now, not just because of the call, but just working with him, I know how to get his attention and bring him back. Yeah. And it had to be through practical application versus technical application.
Correct.
Of presenting.
But I know this person too, he's going to appreciate the technical information, but it didn't need to be presented to him.
Correct.
As long as he has it.
Yes.
He's one of he learns or he absorbs. I think we weren't trying to teach him anything. No. We were sharing information with him, but he absorbs in that way. And that's one of the secret ingredients is understand your audience.
Yes.
So I know we're going
to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Danelle has done her fair share of public speaking. One of the things, and you set it up at the top, you taught me this a long time ago, is preparedness.
Yes.
So we can't underline that enough. I don't care, again, if you're talking to your client like I did earlier today, or if you're talking to a group of 300 people, you gotta be prepared. Right.
So I'm going to give a real life example that happened to me probably 10 plus years ago. Okay. This is when I changed. I've never not been prepared for a presentation. I mean, I usually put the slides together. I did the research. Yes. And again, in this instance, this was about subject matter. This is a subject matter expert. I was giving a presentation on social media. You were with me. We were out in LA.
Yes.
We're speaking to maybe a group of, 200, let's say. And we had all the slides, had everything going, and we were practicing in the hotel room. I had what I was toggling between is the information on the slide, which we had pared down greatly. We knew we needed to be more image centric, not word centric. Right. But then I would have notes underneath those slides for days. And I felt like I had to memorize that.
Yes.
So it became a monologue. And then I couldn't grasp it. So I forgot the finesse of telling a story. I felt like I needed to teach someone master level social media, a master level course in social media in 30 minutes.
Yeah, no.
With a 10-minute Q&A. Versus, what's the story about social media that you need to know 10, 12 years ago that will help you see how this form of communication might support your business?
Yes.
And might help us increase consumption of fresh produce, which was the ultimate goal. How can we utilize?
You went off the script.
I remember.
It was awful for me.
Because
I knew the words.
You knew the words. And you're like, can't you just get the words right? But when you're the one that has to deliver that and look in people's face.
Of course. I didn't blame you.
I scrapped it. I had the note, in my form, what I had worked my way into at this stage is again, speaking on a subject was I'd have the slides printed out so you could see the notes and I'm flipping pages and because my natural instinct is to go into antidote, to share information. But I was holding myself back by reading word for word notes that I had beautifully, that would have been perfect for a blog post, by the way.
Yes.
But yet I wasn't using it as a guide. I was like, I have to say all of these things so that they'll believe me. And I hope that resonates with you all. Yeah. I was not fearful of standing up there, but I was fearful of what I might say.
That you weren't the smartest.
Or
someone knows.
That they couldn't. I knew I was smart in the subject. I wouldn't have been asked to speak.
Right.
But I wasn't trusting that.
Right.
I felt like I had to go over and over, and it was my smarts and what I knew about the subject that was going to move someone from disbelief to belief.
Right.
Okay. And keep them engaged, because sometimes I speak a lot, and I've been asked to share my story many, many times in many different formats. But in this instance, it was about a subject, and so I scrapped it. And I know you were scared out of your mind.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember, our slides had like one
Words.
sentence, and it was a beautiful. But I had begun studying Steve Jobs and his presentation skills, and I didn't feel like I'd fully mastered that, but I knew enough to put down the script. You know this information way more than anyone else in the room. They are depending on you to help them see what you can already see. And if there is someone in that room that knows as much about you, they're going to light you up in the Q&A, and you're going to have a great conversation because you love to learn too. So don't be scared about not knowing anything that might come your way. I say all of this to say that this is when I transformed from robot, because that's what I had worked my way into. I was a pretty decent speaker coming out of school, but going into my career, I found myself in this cesspool of information overload.
Yeah.
Too many slides, too much information. And maybe I'll learn to take, again, we knew from being in marketing that less words on the titles were great. But what we took away off that slide, I just put it down in the damn notes. and then try to memorize it. And I couldn't do it. So this is when I transformed from robot to storyteller. And I remember at one point, I literally stepped off the stage. I had a podium.
Yes, you did.
I didn't even use the podium. I took off my jacket.
Yes.
It was a power move that I didn't even realize the power in. I didn't know that then.
It was courageous to know.
It was actually brave to step off the stage, okay? So if y'all listened to the last week's episode, it was brave of me just to step off the stage. Ultimately, the entire presentation, the style, me inviting fear in of doing something different than what I was accustomed to, that's when it became courageous. Again, if you've listened to that episode, this is probably a great example for you. I took off my jacket, I rolled up my sleeves, and I said, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to tell you a story today about social media and how I think it can improve what we're all ultimately trying to do. So I did some key things. I brought them in. They could see themselves in my story from the get-go. And we're going to walk through some of these tactics. But I'll go ahead and just finish the story, is that, and I could see it. They were on there. They didn't lose eye contact.
No.
Because I was presenting what I had to say, even though it was a kind of an informational type topic, I still turned it into a story.
Yes.
And I could feel my confidence grow because of the audience. They were with me. You were with me. Mm-hmm. I think my presentation didn't run over. It was right on time.
It was.
But the Q&A, they were like, we want to just keep it going.
Yes.
The Q&A ran for so long. And I remember you and I could just feel in that moment that taught me, if you want someone to stay with you, we don't change people in a moment, in a 40 minutes, whatever we have, with information alone. There's a story there, and they have to see themselves in it. Then they want to hear what we're gonna do with this information and how to utilize it. That's the day I became a better, because I always work on, I'm not trying to reach a certain, but it was a great moment in my trajectory in terms of being a speaker. That is when I embraced storytelling, which I already knew. I knew how to tell great stories. I love to tell stories. There's a reason why we say long story long around here, is I love to tell a story, but I wasn't doing that to persuade people or to comfort people or whatever it might be. I wasn't using storytelling. I was using information.
That's right.
And I think that came from a lack of confidence.
Probably.
In my own prescribed limitation is what that was.
Yes.
So, and I do believe that is one of the ways that we overcome this.
Yes. Okay, Danelle, let's dive into tips for our listeners. Let's talk about some things and some words and some behaviors that we had to adopt in order to overcome our fear of public speaking.
Yeah, so a lot of this is pulled from a number of different places. And like I said, I studied Steve Jobs, and I have to start with that. Like, I studied him as the storyteller, and that's really what changed things for me. But the tip number one is all the things that we know and that we probably do well, but is to be prepared.
Yes.
And we talked to this, and we're sharing some bonus content now. So if you're interested in our Insiders Club, please go to our website and learn more about that. But one of the things about preparedness is it's not just being prepared with the information you have to share. Being prepared also means understanding the space that you're going to be in and speaking in, understand the equipment that's going to be available for you. I will tell you, always ask for a mic. It's called a lav or a
lavalier.
A lavalier. Oh, I thought it was a lava mic. Oh goodness. Anyway, they're probably like, what the hell is a lava mic?
They know what you mean.
Anyway, one that gets clipped onto you and you can walk around. It doesn't matter if you want to stand still. It's still better, in my opinion, versus holding a mic and trying to, again.
Pretend like you're not going to sing Tina Turner next.
Well, that's for me. For most people, it's like holding a mic.
I want to do that too.
It can make you even more nervous.
Yes,
and so
it can,
being more natural of like, I'm just talking to you.
Yeah.
That allows you, but being prepared in that way. And also, I think it's key, being prepared to know something about that audience. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's your team, you should know that. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing an internal presentation or talk, you already know that, but it's knowing what they might be feeling in that moment. Mm. So if you're addressing them about a challenge, if you're addressing them about an opportunity or a decision that's been made.
It's almost like know the problems of the audience that you're speaking to.
And sometimes you're speaking in an association thing and they're just in an education session. Yes. It can be a number of things.
They're not worried.
Right. If it's you sharing your story, because you've been asked to come, and I've had to do that, and I've been privileged enough to be able to do that. It's like, what about my story means something to this audience? If it's an audience of all women, I know how to tailor that. Mm-hmm. If it's an audience of men and women, I need to be prepared in that way. If it's an audience of students, that's different than it's an audience of professionals. And so preparedness is not just about the information that you're going to share. It's the environment and, most importantly, the audience.
Right.
Thinking about them and really giving that thought, sometimes more so than the information, because you probably already know the information if you've been asked to speak.
Right.
So that's pro tip number one.
I think that's
or not pro, but
maybe
just
the most important one. So being prepared.
Yes.
Okay. Number two, and this is one that I feel is important, or at least for me, this helped transform my mindset around public speaking, is letting the butterflies give me wings. So
I love that.
I remember a few years back, I was chosen because public speaking was such a huge fear of mine. I was in leadership class and we all had to vote on who was going to give our final presentation, our final speech to the industry at large.
There's 12 of you in the leadership class.
12 of us in leadership class, and in addressing a room of, I'm going to say 200 because that sounds like a good number, but it might have been more.
It was definitely more. I was in the audience.
Yes, you were, right in the front row. And I just watched you the whole time. But they've, of course, once I came clean in the group with what my big fear was, they chose me to give the damn speech. Like, they're sadists or masochists. I don't know which one, but one of those really weird words. So I did it, but I was paralyzed behind stage. I could hear everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening and I'm like, I'm up next. I'm up next. I'm up next. I'm up next. And I mean, it was so awful. Well, I'm like you. Mm-hmm. I go to 3 in growth. I hit a stage, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. Just get me on it.
Yes.
So once I stepped on the stage, I don't think it was the most eloquent speech I've ever given. It was, I had to read it. Well, I don't like doing that.
Because it was not just your words or thoughts. You were sharing it was a collective.
Correct.
From your team. So that can be challenging.
Yes.
Very challenging.
But what I did, when the minute I stepped foot on that stage, what was going through my mind is, Megan, you're a performer, sister. Mm-hmm. You got this. Like, what are you afraid of? Mm-hmm. So it was like a pep talk, call it stress turning into some sort of optimistic message. Mm-hmm. It was definitely myself, but it was that instinct.
Yes.
Going, listen, girl, you got this. You used to dance on stages.
That's what I mean. And we forget that.
Yes.
And so many of you out there, you were either in dance or cheer, or you played some sport.
Yes, you performed.
You showed animals. That's what I did. Yes. And I played sports too. And I did try to dance, but then they asked me to stop doing that. But that's a whole nother story. But we forget that.
We do.
And so
it's the same.
And performance, let me be clear. It doesn't mean that you're going to be inauthentic.
No.
What do we have in common when we're dancing, playing a sport? We're performing to give people something to relate to, be inspired by.
It's an energy exchange.
It's beautiful. It's an energy exchange.
Yes.
But whatever reason, we're up on a stage, we have a PowerPoint,
have to speak.
and Lordy, here we go. And so, again, I love what you have to say. I love how you've characterized this is the butterflies give you wings. Mm-hmm. If you're not feeling something,
something's wrong.
To me, something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And what you don't want is that those butterflies to be because you don't know your subject, you don't know your space, and you don't know your audience.
No.
Right.
No. You want it to be about you because you got this.
Exactly. All right. Number 3. And again, this is reframing something I've already said, but tell a story you want to hear. Think about yourself sitting there. You have to think about 2 things when you do this. You have to think about a time where someone spoke to you and you could not wait for it to be over.
Right. Like I can't keep my eyes open.
I cannot keep my eyes open. We've all dozed. Why was that? What was the person doing?
Yeah.
Try not to emulate that because they were just scared and not prepared. Just remember that.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with going, I don't want to be like that. So early people who watched me speak, it's okay to think about Danelle in those early years. We don't want to be like that.
No.
Night. Also think about a time where you heard someone speak and you didn't want it to end. Or you couldn't wait to raise your hand. Or you couldn't wait to get up and go say something to them afterwards. Or you followed up or whatever that thing was. What did they do differently?
Right.
Think about it for a minute. And that can be in your company.
Tiny little thing to a big thing.
Exactly.
Yes.
So think about what that is. And it just in the delivery, what was it about that particular message that was shared with you? Let's not, again, pigeonhole it into just a public speaking circumstance.
Sure.
I still believe, depending on what it is, especially when we're educating someone, that visuals are important. Mm-hmm. Again, the right kind of visuals. And we can have a whole, I don't know that we would do a podcast episode, but maybe we'll do some bonus content on that is the right way to present using visuals. And part of a story is not, spoiler alert, it's not more than 10 words on a slide.
Right.
It's not.
No.
Even graphs need to be really sparse in terms of information. So that's critical too. And you're like, well, Danelle, what if I'm giving a presentation to the company relative to financials? You have to think to yourself, I have to do this. You have to coach me on this all the time. Danelle, that's too much information. And I want everybody to feel like they have all access. And what I've learned to do is say, I'm going to tell you what the most important thing you need to know about the current state of financials. And then I'm going to put this deck and the details on the drive and have at it. And then please, by all means, come to me with the detailed questions beyond what you have the opportunity to ask today.
Right.
But I wanted to, and it was a respect thing.
Yes.
And I wanted to teach. We need to teach people about money for them to respect money.
Right.
Well, not in the 30, 45 minutes that maybe I was going to keep people's attention. That probably wasn't necessary.
Right. To a team of marketers.
Exactly. You want to run from numbers quicker than any other.
Yes.
Exactly. So yeah. So definitely think about story in a number of contexts, what you want to hear.
Yes.
And then making visuals your friend and not your foe.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Okay. We've talked a little bit about this and specifically the example of you using your space wisely with, I have a podium, getting there early. You talked about preparedness. Mm-hmm. Podiums are typically what's there if you're giving a bigger speech. I mean, heck, I address the company all the time in here, and I even you have the desk. I use it for convenience.
It's like a stand-up desk.
It is. But every now and then what I want to give you permission to do is to walk around.
Yes.
So even if you're addressing your team, if you're addressing a bigger group and you're on a big stage, like Danelle and I have experience doing, that's cool. Walk around the stage, get off the stage. We got off the stage for Q&A and everyone loved it.
That's right.
We walked around. We handed out the papers we wanted people to utilize when we were going through exercises. Yep. We didn't ask someone else to do that. We got in the weeds with the people. We got in the experience with them by doing and engaging with them. We didn't sit on some high horse,
right?
And it helped humanize us.
Yes.
So remember that even when you're speaking with your teams, walk around the room. You don't have to be robotic or get up. If you're used to sitting down, sometimes I'll just get up.
Yep.
and walk around the room or walk over to the whiteboard and be like, can we whiteboard something here? I think I have an idea, and I'll write it down. I'm hoping that they will emulate that.
Yep.
Other leaders in the room will emulate that behavior.
Next is engage with your audience. So again, I think a lot of the times we're asked to speak, we give the information and there's a Q&A. I have found it to be successful if you can engage with people during a speech.
Yes, you do.
So you make a point, and it's, for me, it's an in the moment thing, but it's a safety net for me.
Man, it's
it
good
takes
when
the
you do it.
and it takes the pressure off of me having to talk the whole damn time. I'm engaged and going, does anybody relate to this? The simple things, like think about your story that you're going to tell. I know it probably starts as a presentation. You're going to craft that into a story, and then you're going to think, I wouldn't over rehearse that.
Yeah.
But plan for it.
Right.
Plan to say, if I find myself talking, how can I engage with them? Sometimes it's like, who's with me?
Yeah.
Have you felt it? And a lot of times that's where effective storytelling is, when you express vulnerability in whatever you're talking about.
Right.
Vulnerability with numbers, vulnerability with knowing that social media, whatever it may be, like there's most likely, if you're telling a decent story, there's a vulnerable aspect to it. That's when you can also invite people in. They want to be there most of the time with you because they've experienced that, or now they're knowing that they probably will experience that. So they're grateful that you're sharing that. And so again, I think it's engage with the audience when appropriate. And I don't know that is, I mean, if I think back over time, sometimes you're not able to do that. Like, we can't engage with you all when we're doing, and I think the podcasting is a form of public speaking.
Yes.
So we can't engage with you while we're recording, but we still invite you in. We still talk to you.
Absolutely.
We find ways to bring you in. And so when you're sharing a story, which I like way better than public speaking.
I know.
Again, we have to use it so that you understand the context, so that you'll listen to the damn episode. But it's finding ways to make sure your audience is still with you. And so sometimes thinking about that ahead of time is great. But what I will tell you, the most authentic is in the moment. When you can feel it.
If you can do it in a way that seems natural, which that's what you've mastered, is the way to do it that seems natural. If you don't feel comfortable with it, don't do it.
Right.
But if you can, it's great.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, I'm not going to go too long into this one because we have talked about it, but try not to read Just Tell the Truth.
Oh, yeah.
Just tell the truth about what you know about social media, the truth as you know it. I mean, I'm talking to the point about vulnerability where it's like, listen, I don't have, you just did it earlier. We don't have a statistic that supports that everyone on the planet is more worried about public speaking than death. That's the truth.
That's the truth.
Right? And so it's the same thing when you're giving a speech. Like, here is what I know for sure.
That's right.
Here's what I know, and here's how I feel, and here's what I think you ought to know, you know. And so you put yourself in a position of authority just by showing vulnerability and telling the truth.
Absolutely.
Even if the truth isn't necessarily a solution, if that makes sense.
Yep. The next one is be someone people want to like. And I think that is a finesse, but it does start with your own recollection of what you enjoy, what you know to be true, and honestly being okay with your style. And kind of thinking about what makes me the most comfortable when I share information. And, you know, I think that you want to be someone people want to listen to, but you can't be that if you're not thinking about your own experience and then thinking about their experience of what they may have in the story. And so, again, if you're giving a talk, a speech that requires information sharing because it's more technical in nature, I don't want to ignore those type of, speeches. Break it up.
Yeah.
Break up the technical pieces that you have to share facts or information on with anecdotes and stories. And it could be about why this is important or what happens if we don't understand these facts, or if we don't make this change that I'm asking you to make, what happens if we don't? So it's utilizing some of those almost, what would you say in a conversation with someone?
Yeah.
If you're trying to move them in a different direction that they might currently be in relative to what they know.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
It is.
So be someone you want, that people want to like. It's like, be someone that people want to listen to.
Yes.
Is what it is.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's interesting.
Like, I
it's
want
relatable.
to enjoy this talk.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that that's what people are thinking about, or this speech, or this whatever, this lesson, then okay, then I'm going to receive this as a friend.
Right.
I'm going to receive this as one of my leaders, hearing that.
And I think a good example of that too is, like, we were asked, and then this is what we keep referring to in episode 34, and it's the beginning of the episode where we talk about this speech. We were asked to give a speech on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
And there's 7+ episodes
Yeah.
in our 74 count here. Because we've experienced it for the last 10 years or whatever, however many years, we know a lot about the Enneagram.
We do.
A lot.
Maybe too much.
Maybe too much. But we didn't just lead with that. We were asked there because we know, but we spent so much time thinking about what's the experience of people, because we had an hour and a half with these people.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we'd have just talked about the Enneagram for an hour, which we could easily have done?
Yes.
Because it is that in-depth of a topic.
Right.
But we brought them into it. They knew their Enneagram numbers. They were sitting at specific tables. We did so much, and I won't go on and on about it, but we spent so much time thinking about their experience. We opened with, when they walked into the room, there was music playing. When they were doing exercises amongst themselves or amongst their tables, there was music playing. We thought about their experience, like what's going to heighten their experience. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is part of that, being someone that people are relaxed enough that they want to listen to you. Be with.
For this next hour and a half.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, okay.
Okay. And then the last one is so easy. It really is so easy, unless you get tripped up as a speaker when you look at people. Mm-hmm. I think some people are taught to look, I'm not going to say it just yet, but we are taught to look, if you have to, above the audience.
Yeah.
Even if you're speaking to a team of 20, like what we do at DMA all the time, you're taught to look above them and look at a wall and just say what you need to say. I have found the authenticity to go down in what I need to say or what I really want to say if I'm not making eye contact. So my tip is make eye contact.
Make eye contact.
With people.
That's right.
And try to do it, if you're speaking to a larger group, try to do it with those on the front row. They're easy. Mm-hmm. And they're usually people you probably already know. They're the people that you've been talking to or coordinating the event with.
Yeah.
So you know those people, and make time for the people in the back of the room. Look at them, walk over to the corners of the stage and try to notice them.
Yep.
People want to be seen, and they want to know that you are engaged with them on a deeper level. That's just one way to do it, other than taking off your clothes to know.
Well, that's what a lot of people are taught, is to picture people without any clothes on. That makes them more relatable. I mean, that's never worked for me. That makes me want to squirm. I don't want it to go either way in that sense. What I will say about that is, yes, it always helps if you know the people in the audience, because you can honestly, and you could ask them beforehand, would you mind if I called you out?
Which you do that.
Not called you out, but would you mind if I engage with you during this presentation? 9.8% of the time, it's absolutely yes, of course. And they're eager, but if you don't know and you're speaking to an audience that you've never met before,
right?
There are going to be people that are nodding their heads. So you can look them in the eye and say, you're with me, aren't you? You get this. Talk to me about, would you mind just giving me what are you thinking on right now? What, you've had this experience, or whatever it may be. Like, you're following me. And then the other way is to also invite that to the general audience. Is there anyone, if you're not finding the nodders, I call them the nodders, they're the helpful ones, or the smilers. I love the ones that are just sitting there smiling and nodding, but they're my favorite.
Yes.
But when you don't have that necessarily, you can just open it up. Does anyone have a question here? Yeah. It doesn't always have to be, are you with me? But yeah, do you have a question? So I think that is critical as well.
Okay. So usually, I know I did this in the last episode too, I ask you what you know for sure, but in this instance, I'm going to ask you, what are the stakes for leaders if they don't learn to manage their fear of speaking to any size audience?
I mean, I would say that if you think of being able to share information that you hold, whether you're invited to do it or it's just expected because you're talking to maybe leaders in your organization or your team in your organization, is that if we don't learn how to do this, we're not going to be able to sell our ideas. When we can't sell our ideas, sell meaning share, first and foremost. Well, if we can't share our ideas or the information that we know, it's going to keep us from promotions. It's going to keep us from being an effective leader that people want to follow.
Yes.
If you're putting everybody knee night all the time, if you it's going to just, in general, I could give 10 more examples. It's just going to hold you back.
Yeah, and even your mental health.
Yeah.
Because as a leader, we're expected to do that. And we'll have some more statistics that we can link to that Danelle is talking to right now. Like she said, you just said, fear of public speaking, it can hinder your promotions.
Yes.
One of the surveys that we will cite said it hinders it by 15%.
Whoa.
Okay.
Wow.
So there are literal statistics that go up because this is such a huge issue with people emotionally. They are studying, okay, how is that holding you back?
Right. And I think sometimes like we're focused so much on the fear of it all that leads to anxiety issues. And we know what anxiety leads us to.
Yes.
I mean, anxiety can plague us health-wise, mentally, emotional.
Yes.
We don't have to go through all of that. But what I would say is we're in control of the fear that plagues the majority of this population. We can do things that change that. And that brings me hope.
Yes.
We just have to talk about it more.
That's right.
And I think, for those of us of a certain generation, and I will call this the wiser, is we felt like we had to go away and go to some classes. I love it. Believe me, if you can go to a class on public speaking, Dale Carnegie, fantastic. And I've studied that. It was when I started to kind of take this topic and go, I'm going to learn from those that moved me. I'm going to learn by watching. So I think somebody that you can learn, there are a couple, like I think Simon Sinek's one of the best.
Great.
Just go to YouTube, watch what he does.
Yeah, you won't take your eyes off of him.
No. Because
or your ears.
Yeah, he's telling you a story. That story may last an hour, and you're just chomping at the bit. So, I believe that we can do there, especially with the information that's available to us now. We can just do so much of our own exploration. Again, if you're running a public speaking business, please let us know. We'll plug you, but. I absolutely believe that there's so much information out there that we're not relegated to that like I was 30 years ago.
Right.
There's a lot of ways to get better at this.
Okay. Great. I think this was helpful. It was certainly helpful for me just as a ongoing learner of how to be better at speaking always. So I hope this was helpful to you too. Let's transition to music.
Okay.
And Danelle doesn't know what I'm going to say right now. I'm not going to say anything crazy.
Okay.
But what I'm going to say is it occurred to me while walking through this episode with you and talking about it, how important music is. We talked about personal branding in our personal branding episode, which I think was about 2 back. Music in alignment with personal branding. Would you say that it is a good move for a speaker to have music playing
as part of it?
As part of it.
Yeah, because you know why? I do believe that. And I didn't always subscribe to that. Now I absolutely insist on music. They can play it themselves and I'll give them direction, but I prefer and you know this, I prefer that it's music that you curate because you can, I'll tell you the reasons why in a minute, but the reason why I think it's important to involve music is because it's universal.
Yes.
And you can control the tempo of the songs.
Yes.
So you can raise the mood, you can calm the mood with music. You can just play instrumental music. If you need everybody to be calm, you can do that. If you need everybody to be hyped up, you can do that. And there's plenty of music out there that's not offensive. There's a lot of hype music that could potentially be a music. So you have to be aware of these certain things. And if music's not your jam, like if you're not there's plenty of people around you that love music that could help you prepare that. Or you can ask the folks that you're working with and to speak. And then even for your own team.
Yeah.
I mean, we play music at all of our retreats when we know a lot of addresses are going to be made, and music is just part of, clearly, it's part of our culture. It's
always a part of the breaks.
But yeah, I think that music, I think that's a great thing to bring up on this episode. Is I do think it's a tool we can use to invite people in.
It is. Before you ever open your mouth.
Before you ever say a word.
That's right. Or even get up on the stage.
Right.
It's the same reason, baseball players have walk-up music.
That's right.
They pick it because it is indicative of what power or what vibe they're about to portray at bat.
Or like, think about football players running onto the field, or, volleyball players, whatever. Like, there's a reason for it.
Managing the mood. Yeah. So use music in your public speaking, even if you're addressing your team. Maybe if it's a time where you're about to talk about something super motivating or new or exciting, you just play some music before you start your conversation. They'll be like, what? Wow.
So think about that for a second. If you think about watching a movie without any music.
Oh, that would be so weird.
That would be so odd. So why shouldn't our stories somehow include music?
Yeah.
And if at the end of the day, we're sharing a story, why wouldn't we use music when appropriate?
Yes.
To help us tell a story.
Help the mood. That is one of the things that Cooper's doing at NYU is learning how to set mood with music.
Well, good, because we need it.
We do. Okay. Thank you, Danelle. Thank you, listeners, for being with us today. We'll put some of the statistics, all the links that we shared with you, all the references we shared with you during this episode, we'll put in the show notes. So don't forget about that. Be sure to tell a friend, especially one in need of public speaking help. So
absolutely,
you might want to send it to me.
Yes.
Because I would listen to it. And until next week, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.